So to me, there's a big difference between something that's costly versus something that's expensive. Expensive to me is paying for something that you did not get what you want. The last time it was used was, I think, 1951. And then it went back to the vault. And I was told it just sounded like it was in 1950 with all the goodness to it. You're going to be the first to hear this. We haven't officially announced it yet, but yes, we are working on an album called
The Fidelity Exchange. Real conversations for people who take listening seriously.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Fidelity Exchange. I'm Drew Baird, founder of Moon Audio, and today's guest has spent more than 25 years doing something most people in the music business don't have the patience for. She hunts down the original tapes. She sits in the mastering sessions herself. She sent test pressings back 6 rounds before signing off, and she's walked away from titles she couldn't do right, even when the money was there. Abey Fonn is the founder of Impex Records, one of the most respected audiophile reissue labels in the world. If you put on a record and felt like you were actually in the room, Impex is part of the reason that's possible. Abey, welcome to the Fidelity Exchange.
Hi, Drew. Thank you for such a wonderful introduction.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So, where did everything start for you with music? When was the first time that music sort of really captured, feelings and emotion in your life? And then we'll get into your journey in the business.
I immigrated to the US when I was about 9. And my parents, to keep me busy and learning English, they bought me this little record player, those little tiny ones that plays the 78s. And that was my first exposure to music and a record player. And music has just always been an important part of my life. I wouldn't say I'm a connoisseur. I like all music. Music is just happy for me. And to this day, on weekends, I'll go listen to local bands. I go, one of my best friends sings in an 80s band. I'll go and dance the night away. It's just it's just a happy place for me.
Amen, amen. So before Impex, you spent years at Cisco Music, one of the original audiophile labels. You worked every part of that business. What did that education actually look like, and why did you eventually decide to start over?
Um, Cisco was really the education for me. I joined Cisco by accident. I was in a place in my life where I was working for Wells Fargo Bank. I was looking for a part-time job because my ex-husband at the time, we were thinking about buying a house. Cisco was a good opportunity. I worked in their accounting department, which tied into what I was doing at Wells Fargo Bank. And it was a journey that kind of took a life of its own. I started in account receivable, then payable, and then work in marketing. And then there was an opportunity, I think it was 94, when I was asked to go to CES to help with accounting. And when you're young and someone says, we're going to pay you to go to Vegas, that's all I heard. I didn't hear anything else. But that was also my first exposure of what audiophile is, what a great sounding system, and what was out of the records outside of Tower Records and what I knew, Virgin Megastores, what was an audiophile reissue. So that was my first experience.
And so what did that education actually, from there you decided to start over, right, with Impex. How did that sort of materialize?
Because I was able to work in pretty much every department at Cisco Music, not just accounting, but in sales and marketing. And then I learned about reissues and all the process. It gave me the confidence and the courage to start Impex Records with my dad. Because after Cisco closed in 2008, I took a 2-year break and went back into finance and realized really quickly that my heart wasn't there. And I was like looking at my clock every hour. And with the encouragement of some industry friends and even family, I decided to start Impex Records with dad and to work on projects that we felt we could bring in, we can elevate, bring a different vision, kind of like East meet West vision to an audience that would appreciate what we do.
And what was the audiophile reissue market missing? What do you think was missing there?
When I was with Cisco and doing a lot of the CES shows, Cisco used to share suites with DCC Compact Classic. We did that for years. Cisco became a distributor for not just DCC on the international market, but also classic records. Learning through their music, experiencing it, I really loved the music, but I felt like there was just like a standard reissue. I felt like we could have added more to the packaging. I would have liked to know more about what I was listening to. So when I started Impex Record, one of my goals was not just to do a great job reissuing the music, but also to bring the insight, the background about the album to the audience. It's like a shared relationship while they're listening to the record. There's a tactile experience where they can read liner notes, history about the creating of the recording, the artist's journey.
Yeah, I keep touting how, vinyl is helping us slow down, be intentional about listening. I miss the days when I was a young kid, 8, 9, 10, 11, running down to my friend's house, a new record comes out. We're all sitting down, we're reading everything about the artist in the sleeve, and that sort of disappeared for a very long time in this world, especially with all the streaming and, the fact that people weren't buying physical media. You've got all this digital music that you're shuffling through, and it's not intentional. I hear so many stories of how kids nowadays with the streaming, they can't even get through one song, right? They're on to the next, they get bored. Whereas with physical media, it's a whole other process where you get to sit back, enjoy. You can't use a remote control on a record to skip, stuff like that. It's more intentional, and that's exactly what I think of when you talk about that. Adding that extra step in there of, I mean, all of your packaging and all of the storytelling that's along with the vinyl is absolutely amazing, and just a wonderful addition to the product itself.
It's a listening to a record to me is a journey, and it's also that you have to engage with the music. I stream. I don't always play record. I have a fantastic SACD player, but I think there's a time and a place for every format. And if you're gonna listen to record, you're engaging, you're slowing down. And I love what you say. It's intentional. I have a great team, a team that I've worked with for years. I've worked with Robert Slager, my art director, for 26 years, Bob Donnelly, 18 years, Chuck Granada for 7 years. And we have our goals and our values are aligned. And every time we work on a project, it's about what else can we bring the audience on the audience journey on this album, not just a great reissue, because there's a lot of great reissues out there.
And there are a lot of bad ones.
There are.
Sometimes I'm, like, wondering, "Why did they even do this?" It just doesn't sound very good. But anyway, so you mentioned to me earlier that your job has become magical, that at some point it stopped feeling like a business and started feeling like something else entirely. When did that happen and what changed?
When you start on any project, it's a process, it's a job, it's research, it's negotiation, it's a lot of, back and forth dialogue, maybe compromises, mapping out how you see this reissue. And that's to me all process. When it becomes magic for me is, let me think of an example. Okay, Sing and Dance with Frank Sinatra, One Step. To me, that is probably the most visually stunning Impex One Step release we have ever done. So getting the request through Sony, working through the original master tapes, pricing, all of that, that's a process. And we work with Chuck Granada, the Sinatra historian, who's an author and had a 14-year run on XM radio with Nancy Sinatra involved in writing the liner note. This was all like the process part, gathering the team, gathering data. And Chuck came over with boxes of memorabilia, history, photos. Again, that's process, sorting through, looking at what we can use. Chuck writing the liner note, which is like a little mini book, tying the photos to the story, that's all process. But once we get to see the layout, how the photos are tying into the story, picking the right paper materials, what type of finish for the jacket. Once we get to hear the test pressing, that's when we start moving from process to magic. And when we get the finished sample, the level of pride and joy, I can't explain it in words. When I opened the sample I received from Stoughton, it was, I mean, you almost want to cry. How beautiful, and years of work of compiling everything we had gathered into this perfect, 32-page booklet and two perfect records.
So I know you want to deep dive into the process. So let's get into that. So let's start at the very beginning of the process, securing the source material. How hard has it become in 2026 to track down original master tapes compared to, say, 10 or 15 years ago?
Oh, the landscape has changed significantly for all reissue labels. I'm sure, a lot of the other labels are having the same challenges. Back then, you put in a request with Sony, Warner, Universal, and you tell them where you want to have it mastered, and the tape shows up. Now, Sony will not allow master tape to leave its vault. If you want to have access to it, the tape can go to Battery Studios or their approved studios, and we can do a one-to-one safety copy, and they'll send the safety copies to us. But even before that, we have to do our own research, finding out what sources are available. Just because they're the label doesn't mean they have the original master. We don't know what was negotiated between artists and label and what was given to them. So, a lot of research, securing tapes, and once we get the tape, it gets sent to the mastering facility. So in the past, we have worked with Bernie Grumman, Chris Spellman, Kevin Gray, and Scott Hall. Once they get the tape, we reach out to them and ask them to please take a listen to see the condition of the tape. There are times where we get the tapes or a safety copy and the sound is not quite where we want it, or it's not what we expected. And we have to go back and say, hey, was the transfer done correctly? Or is this, did we get the right source? If the sound quality is slightly off and not too, and I'm going to bring up Bob Donnelly, who is part of the mastering team. He's a producer of several of our releases, and he's our QC director. If it doesn't meet Bob Donnelly's standard, the question is it because our standards are too high or there's actually a problem with the tapes? We have had to spend money to do a second transfer to compare. Sometimes transfers are not done correctly because of tape alignment issue. We have gotten the wrong source. So that's another step. But once we secure the right master, and the engineer says, yeah, it sounds pretty good, we schedule a mastering session, which Bob Donnelly and myself always attend in person. And we come in with original copies, maybe copies from a previous predecessor, copies that we enjoy, and then we start comparing, how does it sound to the tape? How close is it to the original? What are we trying to achieve? So we have to map out our goals. And Bob's goal and my goal has always been, it needs to sound natural, musical. And that's always been what's really important to us. Of course, you need everything. You need to have detail and separation, your highs, your lows. But if you have all of that and yet sound sterile, that's not music, because music doesn't sound like that naturally. We get a test ref after the mastering session. Bob takes it home to his home studio or his listening room, which he's got 3 different turntables set up, and he'll check them out. Oftentimes, the first round of test ref needs more EQing, more changes. We have gone through 2, 3, 4 rounds of test reps. And every time you do a test rep, that's more costs, engineer time, setup, and the cost of the ref. Once Bob Donnelly gives his signature approval, we cut lacquer, plating, and test pressing. And test pressings, on rare occasions, we get the first round and we're like, wow, 2 thumbs up. Sometimes we have gone through several rounds. I think there was this one title, we have gone through as many 6 or 7 rounds of test pressings. because with test pressing, you might find problems. Say, I'll hypothetically, side one, track two. You fix that problem, and then you make a second test pressing, and now the second test pressing, side one, track two is fixed, but side one, track three may now have a problem. So getting a really good test pressing for both side A, B, C, D, it's a process. And Bob gets 7 copies, I get 3 copies, and then both of us will QC it. But it has to have Bob's approval before we can move forward.
I bet nobody has any understanding about how complex it truly is, and when they see a price tag so high, they're like, "Why does this cost so much?" Well, folks, I mean, to get quality, it takes time, energy, and money, and all the things you've just said. I mean, it's tough. Have there been titles that you've spent years chasing that just never came together? An album you desperately wanted to release but couldn't get the tape or couldn't get the right tape?
There's been many, many titles that I have spent years chasing. And for me, I was not able to get the titles is mainly because another label has secured it. So that's another layer of challenge that a small uh, boutique label like myself, I'm going up against larger uh, independent labels who have a larger team, larger resources, who can negotiate a more favorable deal for the labels or for the artists. So I've often lost out on titles that I know I can do a great job, that I personally love, that I've not been able to do. And there has been a few titles where we have walked away from because I know I can't do a better job. And a title is Belafonte at Carnegie Hall. I licensed that title, and I got a 2-track analog master from Sony. And it didn't sound right to me because I had the classic record version. And I went back with Bernie. We went back and forth, and I was trying to, suggest all these ideas, tricks, fairy dust, I call it. And there was limitations on what I can do with a 2-track master. This was a title that I know Chad at Analog Production was also interested, and he had access to the original 3-track. You just can't. And I knew if I put out my version, people were going to compare that to classic record, and it wasn't going to sound as good. So to me, there was no point even attempting. So I walked away, and Chad released the Belafonte Carnegie Hall, and it sounds fantastic.
So, walk me through what a production actually looks like once you've committed to a title, from the moment you have the tape in hand to the moment you sign off on the final pressing.
So the steps are: we get the usable tapes. From there, we go into mastering, and we're mastering with samples that we brought in to the studio, which could be previous predecessor versions, original release. And then from there, we go into, once we finish mastering, the engineer cuts us a test rep. Bob Donnelly takes the test rep home, listens to it on 3 of his systems. Once Bob Donnelly signs off on the test rep, the engineer cuts a lacquer. The lacquer then goes to plating, and then plating, after that, we get test pressings. Once a test pressing is approved, we now can submit a purchase order to the major label for the orders. While this is all happening in the background simultaneously, Robert Slager and I are working on the jackets, the labels, the booklets, the interviews, and all of that. So Bob Donnelly's doing the sound, Robert Slager is doing the packaging. So we're working together simultaneously. I try to work simultaneously to save time. So while Bob is doing the mastering part, we're finishing the jackets, labels, the booklets. We have to send that off to either the label, major labels like Sony, Warner, and Universal, to sign off, and or the artist to sign off. that they approve what we have created, because we try to use the original jacket, but the inside we often change it up to accommodate our release. And the jackets are always made in Stoughton. Our jackets are Stoughton is our choice of a printer, and that again is a 8 to 12 week process. Once before the jacket goes to manufacturing, Robert and I always do an in-person press check. If it's a new title, we are always there in person, 7 a.m. at the door, and we do press check every sheet, every page to make sure colors are correct. It's not printed too hot. Last round of checking, make sure there's no spell check issues, and we watch the sheets get printed.
And so you've talked about, and hopefully I pronounce this correctly, Al Di Meola Saturday Night in San Francisco album as a production story that really covers everything: negotiation, artist collaboration, a remix that didn't sound right, ending up at Skywalker during COVID. Can you walk us through that one?
Yes. Well, that was a really fun project for us, and a very long one as well. It started in Al's basement. He had 16-track multis in his basement, and it was kind of during right before COVID when Chuck Granada and I were made aware of this, and we were talking to Sony about this. Actually, let me back up. Impex reissued Friday Night in San Francisco on both 33 and 45. And it was such a great success that Al's manager came to us and said, "Hey, would you consider releasing Saturday Night in San Francisco?" At first, I thought it was like same performance another night. And to our surprise, it's a whole different performance next night. And it was also the last performance of a 3 months tour the artist was doing together. It was Al, John, and Paco. So Al gave us a story how there was, he had these unmixed tapes. He wanted to bring it to fruition. He loves what we did with um, Friday Night. And that's kind of like how the negotiation started. We talked to Sony, we talked to Al's manager. Chuck Granada was a big part of it because Chuck met with Al and they sat down and kind of Al gave Chuck the whole background about the tape, the performance, the history, the concert, and that's where it kind of started. So Al did the original mixing, and he gave us a finished mix. And when we got the mix, it was good, but there was no magic because it felt more like a studio recording. It didn't sound like a live concert, which it was. So it took a little bit of negotiating and pushing because he liked what he did. And when I told him to listen to Friday Night and then listen to Saturday Night, it doesn't even feel like it was from the same concert. Finally won him over. He agreed and he allowed us to remix the album. Um, so we sent the tapes over to Skywalker Sound, and it was Eureka Anderson who from Anderson Studio who helped us to do the transfer, and we had to transfer the analog tapes to DXD. Then from there, we took the new transfer to Roy Hendrickson in New York to re to make a new mix, and we worked with Al's engineer, Miss Katsu. Oh my God, I'm terrible. I can't remember his name, but Al's engineer to make sure the mix was correct the way Al wanted it. Because the performance was very long, and to edit like an hour and a half concert down to 40 minutes was also challenging, itself. So we created a new mix, sent it to Al for approval. He was really happy, and then from there we sent it to Bernie Grunman for mastering. And all along the way, Al was really proactive. Of course, he had a full say in the mix. He was involved in mastering. We had meetings with him regarding how packaging was going to look, what he would like to see. He provided us some fantastic photos. And so this is, another artist collaboration project. It wasn't just him signing off, but him being involved. And it wasn't just Al. when we, got the first round of test pressing, we sent that off to John as well. And John had also, he had to have a sign up on what he liked. And when he got the test pressing, he had some EQ changes he wanted to make. So we had the artist buy in. And when we were done with the project, I remember, yeah, when when we were done with the project, both artists were very pleased. And when Alf heard his album in Munich, um, he said, "Gosh, I had no idea it could sound this good."
Touchdown.
Touchdown. And
Yeah, yeah.
the success of an album, when you have an artist collaboration project, and when the artist is just as enthusiastic and just as happy and proud, the success of the album completely changes. Al was the brand ambassador for Munich High End Society, their 40th anniversary. So he went to Munich with me, and he did a lot of meet and greet demonstrations, storytelling. And when he heard Saturday Night in one of those reference rooms, I mean, his eyes was just like, wow, this is my record.
So the Doug Webb project, you mentioned that that one required you to insist on a remix before you released it, which added 7 months to the timeline. What does it feel like to have to make such a difficult call and to essentially say, look, this isn't ready when the artist is already ready to, collect basically?
You're going to be the first to hear this. We haven't officially announced it yet, but yes, we are working on an album called Variation. It's a Doug Webb All Star Cast project, and it is also another Impex artist collaboration release. And this release has a cast of who's who. Um, Doug and Bob Donnelly have been longtime friends, and I think Bob and Doug was listening to some music, and Doug started telling Bob about this album. And this album is it's really fun. It's like jazzy, funk, rock, and you're wondering where does the rock come in? The rock comes in because it's Danny Carey from Tool on the drums with Doug Webb on the saxophone. And for those who may not know Doug Webb, he's been a touring uh, musician for almost 50 years, and he's worked with like uh, Stanley Clark, Freddie Hubbard, Carly Simon, Rod Stewart. So he's been around, and he's a fantastic saxophonist. So with him and Danny Carey on Tool from Tool, and then the who's, you got Mitch Foreman, who played with like Wayne Shorts and John McLaughlin, and you got Jimmy Earl, who played with Chick Corea, and the cast is just fantastic. And the album is just has a life when you mix jazz and rock together. And when Doug came to us with this project, he gave me a finished mix, and Bob Donnelly was not happy. It had that same vibe that we got from the first mix from Saturday Night in San Francisco. Great album, but it just didn't have that magic. It didn't have the life. And we tried to master the first mix, and we just couldn't pull out what we wanted from the mix. We weren't feeling it. Um, so we said to Doug, we love to release this album under Impex. Thanks for choosing us. But if it's on an Impex release, it does not meet our standards of what we think this record could do. So the option is to find another label or go back in the studio and remix it. And we tried to work with what he had for 7 months, and he decided he was going to spend the money and go back in the studio. And Bob Donnelly was involved in the remixing this time. So we went back to Roy Hendrickson, who did Saturday Night, remixed it, resequenced it, and everyone's really happy.
Can't wait to listen to that one. That's gonna be a good one. I mean, it's sometimes
It's a
the
good one.
strangest collaborations can be the most amazing collaborations.
That's what I said. When I was first exposed, I was like, rock and jazz, but it's a fun album. It's got a lot of life, and it's something different. Really, something different. And then the artist collaboration part isn't just about the sound and the remixing and the mastering part, but both Danny and Doug came to Staten with me during press check, and it was such a fun day because these musicians who've been making records for decades and who's pumped out millions of records. These musicians, they may be in the studio making the music, but they don't often get to see what happens behind the scene. So they got to see what press check is and what machines are being used, the process. It was just a fun day for everyone involved.
So at Moon Audio, my whole philosophy is built around the idea of the weakest link. The signal chain between a recording in your ear is only as good as its worst step. And my job is to make sure the cable isn't that step. But listening to you talk through this process, I'm realizing your job is to make sure the very first step in the chain, the source, is never the weak link either. You're working from opposite end of the chain. Talk to that a bit.
Oh my gosh! Thank you for saying that. I've always said hardware software is a marriage. You can't do without each other, and you can have the best system, the best cables, the best of everything. But if the source isn't good, you're not gonna it's not gonna be enjoyable. So we are working for the opposite opposite end. So my job is to make sure the foundation of the recording has to be good. The process has to be good. And the process is really complex because think of how many hands, how many people are involved of making a record. uh, From the engineers, the platings, to the pressings, to the QC. And then once we have a really good record, you have to have a proper system and a proper setup to extract that for the end user. So it is definitely a very important relationship.
So, where in the production process do you see the most quality loss? The moments where something that started out great doesn't make it through intact.
To me, every step is a potential quality loss. I don't see it as one particular step is the most detrimental.
It's additive.
It's added. Thank you. Additive. Not getting the right source, a quality loss. Not not properly master right there. If the plating is done incorrectly, that's another quality loss. If it's a bad vinyl formulation, bad pressing, quality loss. It's just a little bit added up. I don't see it as one particular process being the quality loss.
So let's talk about analog versus the digital question, because Impex is known as an analog label, but John McLaughlin's project you did came from a digital source. How do you actually make the call? Is the AAA question still the right question to be asked?
Impex has always favored analog. We are an analog label. Majority of our releases is analog, and that's always the first thing we ask for. And working with analog is the most complex, but to us, it is the most natural. We don't oppose digital. John McLaughlin is the new release. It was recorded digital. It was a great sounding album. So to me, it's okay. I would always prefer analog, but the Doug Webb project, that's also digital because it's a new recording. It was recorded digital. If a digital recording is done right, it can sound really fantastic. And again, it's the team and the people working together to release the album that makes it sound great.
Sure. I mean, I often say to people, I mean, there is no right or wrong. There's just differences, right? They just sound different. There's, yeah, again, no right or wrong. All of our ears are sort of like fingerprints. No two are the same. I get so tired of that. Is digital better? Is analog better? Is DSD better? Is PCM better? It's a never-ending battle, and the answer is yes.
Yeah. It's a personal preference. It's
Yeah.
also on your setup, what you have at home, how you listen to music. I find analog to be very natural to my ears, and it feels real. I also listen to digital recording. I'm happy with it. I look at how it's recorded, and I don't run away from digital if it's recorded well and recorded right. But if I'm doing a reissue and if I know there's an analog source, I always go for the analog source first.
So the Frank Sinatra Sing and Dance One Step, you mentioned the original master tape for that one hadn't been heard in about 68 years. What was it actually like to put that tape on for the first time?
Before Impex had access to the tape, the last time it was used was, I think, 1951. So I think it was released in 1950, then it was used again in 51, and then it went back to the vault. So the tapes went to Andreas Meyer at Swan Studio, also and another amazing, I think like 5-time Grammy winning engineer. I've known him since the 90s. If we cannot get access to the master tapes directly, I always insist on having it sent to him for transfer because he is absolutely meticulous. So Chuck was at the studio with Andreas, and they did the transfer, the 3-track transfers, and then that was sent to Chris Spellman for mastering. And I was told it just sounded like it was in 1950 with all the goodness to it. There was some, some tape issues that had to be repaired, but it sounded fantastic. And because that tape was in such good condition and the transfer was done so meticulously, that lends us to a great mastering session, which also required a lot of back and forth EQing, but it's all accumulative, as you said, and the end result was a phenomenal mono one step.
So you made a distinction on our intro call that I've been thinking about ever since. You said Impex records aren't expensive. They might be costly, but those are two very different things. Can you unpack that for our audience?
Yes. um, this is my personal opinion and also how I live my life when I make purchases of, anything from handbags, shoes to other records. So to me, there's a big difference between something that's costly versus something that's expensive. So costly means it's the cost of making the product in the quality we want properly with the right professional team. So it's costly. Expensive to me is paying for something that you did not get what you want. Impex projects are costly, from potentially multiple tape transferred, working with artists, you know, creating a packaging that holds up in time, all the added value from bonus materials, hiring historians like Chuck Granada to write the liner notes. Not we don't give you throwaway bonuses, licensing photos from the Getty to put together a package that could be kind of like a coffee book table or coffee table book, yeah. And on top of, work, a fabulous recording and a fabulous pressing. All of that adds up and it's costly. So the project is costly. We charge accordingly, which I don't think we charge a lot. And so that's, in my opinion, what costly means. Expensive is when you spend same amount of money to get something that you think you're buying and you're not getting what you want. The product doesn't meet your expectation. Then it's expensive. You just wasted your money. And I'm I say it with confidence that Impex is costly but not expensive. It doesn't mean that we don't have manufacturer defects from time to time. There's a print issue. There's so many moving parts that things happen. But as a whole, we try to deliver um, uh, value for your investment.
You mentioned that one of the things that made your work feel different lately is getting to collaborate with directly the living artists. Tell me more about that shift. What does it actually change about the process?
When you're doing a reissue, you are working with a label. Sometimes label referring to like Sony and Warner and Universal, um, and sometimes label and estate. When you work with a living artist, that changes the dynamic because you now have someone to tell you the story behind the recording, the history, and what took place. And their enthusiasm feeds into my enthusiasm. And we work off of each other's energy. And it just makes the whole project more interesting when it's not just, oh, it's a great record, there's no ticks and pops. It's like, it's a great record, there's no ticks and pops. Why was it made? How it was made? Who it was with? What was the artist doing at that time? All of that adds to me the magic of making the record. And getting the artist's input also changes the dynamic because when you're doing a reissue, it's just what we think it should sound like or how we feel. But when you involve artists, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, it takes a different dimension. Oftentimes, it elevates the project.
Last week, you did a press check with Danny Carey from Tool. Now, we've already talked about the collaboration and all that, but what happened when Danny saw his own record being made?
I should have asked him if it was his first press check, but it appears to me like it was his first press check. When we brought out the sheet for them to sign off on approval, he just joy, pride. They were happy to see what we created, what they gave us, and how we worked with the material. And then when he went to watch, Stoughton has this massive Heidelberg printer. Um, that they use. And Danny was standing at the edge of the printer, filming like his sheets coming out of the printer. He was just all smiles. And and Doug was just proud. He was so happy. He's like, gosh, they just kept saying this looks good, this looks like quality. And then by some luck, as Daniel was walking, doing a tour of Stoughton, which by the way, we videoed it. So we're going to have little clips of that when the album's ready to be released. Stoughton just finished printing a tour album, an actual Tool album. And so he picked one up. He's like, Tool. So he wanted to take a sheet home for memory. But it was just nice. Everybody was happy. It's a good experience, and he wasn't just watching it being printed. He saw how things were finished, how things are being fabricated, the steps, and how many people involved, just setting up the printer, cleaning the drums, getting it printed, and then in between prints, we were pulling sheets out to just make sure the quality was consistent from the sheet to the finishing, how it's being folded, how it's being trimmed. I've never done an actual count, but I could say at any given time, a record probably goes through 30 pairs of hands at least. Just plating alone, Dorn was telling me, takes about, 8 individuals from time we receive the lacquer to the time it's, we have a stamper.
So, working with John McLaughlin, what did you learn about him as a person, and what changed how you approached the album?
John is such a gentleman. He's like old world charm. First of all, he's got a great sound system at home. Not all artists have a turntable setup or have a proper system. John has a great sound system. He plays record. He knows what he wants. He is engaging. He gives direction. He's involved, not just in sound, but in how the vision, how he sees the album should look and feel. John is also very collaborative that when I have question, I send him an email, quick to respond. And we met, we had, dialogues for years. And we met this year when he came out for a Grammy nomination and we went to lunch together. What I learned about John that I didn't know was he loved to sketch. He loves sketching, and he is writing a book, but not in the traditional sense about his journey or his music, but he's sketching. He's creating art, and each sketch is a reference of his experience, either tied to an album, a person, an experience. Yeah, he is such a gentleman. You don't see that. I mean, we went to lunch, and I walked in And he stood up and he pulled my chair out for me, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, John McLaughlin is pulling a chair for me."
Very respectful. Very respectful.
Yes, yes.
So we're actually starting to sell vinyl here at Moon Audio, which means I'm going to be putting records in front of customers who may have never held a 180-gram pressing before. What do you think 5 titles that would make the strongest first impression are? What should I be spinning for people when they come in?
It's like asking me to pick my favorite kids. Um, okay, so I will give you my personal, favorite, and part of it's not just sound, but the visual enhancement or just my experience. So, hands down, gets Gilberto one step, gets Gilberto one step, hands down. Famous Blue Raincoat, that's a title that I have lived with for so my dad met Jennifer in 1999, and, we started releasing her album, Famous Blue Raincoat, in probably every audiophile format that I can do. And then The Hunter and The Well. And Jennifer has such a high expectation that it was really the benchmark that started, how we did our reissues. So Famous Blue Raincoat gets Gilberto one step. Saturday Night in San Francisco was so meaningful to me. Frank Sinatra, Sing and Dance with Frank Sinatra, one step, both visually and sonically. That's just a home run. And then if you want to some great listening albums that you can listen all the time, it's really fun, never disappoint. Legrand Jazz, Michel Legrand, Legrand Jazz 45, uh, Bud Shank Holiday in Brazil. That's another album that just I did not see that coming. Did not see. Bob Donnelly turned me on to that album. Wasn't that familiar with Bud Shank? It's a fun, happy album. It's a lot of sonic goodness. It's a great album, and those are 33, so it's not very expensive, and you don't have to get up and flip several times.
Is there an album that's underappreciated that a lot of people don't know about, but they should?
I think both Bud Shank titles are underappreciated.
See the wheels turning.
Yeah. One of it's a classical album. People, classical may not be everyone's first choice, but,
Mhm.
Heifetz the Lark, it's a rare, release. It's not heavily reissue. It is by far one of the most beautiful classical album I have ever experienced. It took me 2 years to, so Bob Donnelly told me about this album. He told me it was violin and organ. And I was like, it's kinda like that whole Tool thing, rock and jazz. I was like, okay." Took me 2 years to do a listening session with him. When I was done with side 1, track 1, I was a puddle in tears. It's such an incredibly powerful, emotional, beautiful album. Heifetz the Lark. Both Bud Shank title, especially Barefoot Adventure, because the album cover has that surf image because it was done for a surf film, people always think it's a surf album. It is so not. It is a fantastic West Coast jazz album. And I've dealers have told me, God, once I put it on, the head goes whipping. What am I listening to? Completely underappreciated.
And what's the white whale title you've spent years trying to license, the one that hasn't come together?
Well, I've tried to license a couple of Santana projects that didn't come to fruition. I was I threw my hat in the ring when we were doing the Steely Dan catalog, which Chad Acoustic Sound, has released and, did a great job. And some of the old, oh god, this was many, many moons ago. I wanted to secure the Stevie Wonder catalog, the old Motown Stevie, yeah, and that didn't come to fruition either.
What's the most exciting thing coming up for Impex that you can share with our audience today?
It's definitely the Doug Webb project from, Variation. Yeah. It just a new it's a new recording, an all-star cast, and having the artists all so invested and collaborative, and having a jazz rock fusion album, it's something new for us. And that's kind of the direction I'm heading. We're still traditional in our reissue, but now we want to expand and not just do reissue with artist collaboration, and now new release with artist collaboration, like Saturday Night in San Francisco, like the John McLaughlin, about music for Abandoned Heights, and now, variations. And so far, all the artist collaboration project has uh, been very successful for us.
So last thing, let's talk about what's on your turntable right now. What are you listening to
Right
right now on
now,
your turntable?
Holiday in Brazil.
Holiday in Brazil.
I've been listening to Holiday in Brazil nonstop for Impex title. And then I've been listening to the, Katie Lane One Step that's not an Impex title.
So I mean, I've been listening to this all week long. I can't tell you how much I enjoy all the people that are on here. I think I was saying to you earlier that, um, you know, this sort of soft, relaxing, laid back music when you're playing when you're working, you'd think of it just being background music that wouldn't sort of catch you off guard. But I keep finding myself sort of wandering away from an email and listening closer to the music. I've got a really nice setup here in my office with a turntable. I mean, I don't know many people that have a turntable at their office desk, but I do because I have to, play with all of this stuff. And I mean, just the collaborations that are going on there and all the different artists, the compilation. I mean, this is an amazing record. And the one that I'm most excited about, because we've talked about it a lot in this one, is the Frank Sinatra one. I haven't opened this one. I'm sort of using this as like a rainy day record because I know there's going to be all kinds of stuff in here to look at. This is the kind of production that I want to find a real special bottle of wine. I want to be with my wife on a Friday night with the candles. We're going to pop this open. I'm not a I can't say that I'm a Frank Sinatra fan. I don't dislike his music. I'm obviously from a different generation, but I am really excited to listen to that one. I mean, because nothing says romance more than Frank Sinatra, right?
Yes, but, do you know the history about that album?
No, not at all.
No.
No.
Okay, so well, thank you for listening to LeGrand Jazz. That album was also our first intro into really elevating our package. When we started working on this project, I mean, look at the titans on that album. I can't think of a single album that you have, Coltrane and Miles Davis and Bill Evans and yeah, it's nuts. It's, Herbie Mann, Ben Webster, Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk. I mean, it's the Titans on, and it's such a great sounding album. And even though it's that you said that soft sounding, it requires you to engage because you want to. It makes you engage. It's one of Robert Sliger's favorite album. He plays that all the time when he's working. That's always on for him. So that was a great project. And the liner note is written by Tom Schnabel, who was a radio host for KCRW for I think 30 something years. Now he's interview also industry titans, and he's got a wealth of knowledge. So his contribution that made the album even more interesting. But that's one of the first projects where we said, album like this, artist like this, we need to elevate it. Can't just be a standard reissue. But with the Frank Sinatra, so I'm not a huge Frank Sinatra fan either. I like him, but it's not like I listen to him all the time. And this album is really important in so many levels, not just because it was an anniversary and all the bells and whistles that Impex put into it, but this recording came at a really pivotal moment during Sinatra's career and the industry. So he, at that time, I think it was like in late 40s, he was 49-ish, not age, 1949-ish. He was starting to lose favor with his audience. And So they decided, okay, to save his career, to make a change, they decided to record him in a more of a snappy, jazzy arrangement, not from his traditional romantic ballad. So that was like his first kind of jazzy record. And at the same time, when that record came out, people were moving away from the noisy 78 shellacs into a higher fidelity of 33. So Sing and Dance with Frank Sinatra is the first uh, Sinatra 10-inch album recorded in its entirety. And this is also the album that kind of relaunched him. And then I think a year later, he was signed with Capitol. So it came at a pivotal moment when the industry was changing formats. Sinatra was recovering from his throat injury, changing his style. So that album is really fun. It's really lively. He feels like he's there. And the bonus material was something that, thanks to Chuck Granata, because we also included bonus material, not just in tunes, but where you hear Sinatra being a producer, an artist, and director, where he was talking to the band, telling them, you're like in the studio with him, hearing him direct this album. And it was all captured on tape. Him talking to the artist, hey, move the drum back, put a blanket there. This is how I want to hear it. It's alive. That album is
Yeah.
alive.
It's like a Rocky story.
Yeah, and then the memorabilia, the photos, and the amount of time it took us to piece it all together, to tie the art and the story and the music. It was really a wonderful journey.
Abey, thank you so much. This was a real conversation.
Thank you for having me on, and I hope your audience finds it enjoyable, and I'm so glad I'm able to share our newest fall release, which your audience is the first to hear, of Variation, the Doug Webb All-Star Cast.
For everyone watching, links to Impex Records and Elusive Disc, where you can find and purchase all the things we've talked about today, are in the description below. Moon Audio is also carrying vinyl now, and if you want to hear what a world-class audiophile pressing actually sounds like in a great system, come find us. If you found this valuable, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more of these things coming with people who are doing this the right way. Abey, thank you again, and we will see you next time on the Fidelity Exchange.